In this video, we're going to talk about building a market for loanable funds. This is essentially a model of financial markets. And once again, it allows us to study how savers and borrowers interact using the financial system in the economy that's in place. And the purpose of building this model is to really explain um, or understand the tools with which we can analyze various government policies that influence saving and investment. So to keep things really simple, economists tend to make certain assumptions. And when we're talking about the market for loanable funds, we are going to make 4 simplifying assumptions. And these can be relaxed, when you want to make the model more complicated, but for our understanding at a very basic level, these assumptions suffice. So the assumptions here are that we just have a single financial market or just one financial market. In which all savers go. So all savers are going to this financial market to deposit their savings. Third, all borrowers take out loans from this financial market. And lastly, there is one real interest rate that prevails in this financial market, which is to say that the return on savings equals the cost of borrowing in real terms. Remember, we talk about the real interest rate because that is the nominal interest rate corrected for inflation. So let's think about what do we mean by loanable funds. Like any other market that we discuss, we want to think about 3 things in this market, in this financial market that we're talking about. The first thing is the supply of loanable funds. The second thing is the demand of loanable funds, and the price that would clear the market would be the price of the loanable funds, which is the interest rate. And this is really the real interest rate that we're talking about here. So let's think about supply. When we think about the supply of loanable funds, we are talking about the funds that come from people who have some extra income that they want to save and lend out. So this could come from, this is basically coming from savings. This could be savings of households. An example could be that you make a deposit in the bank. You make a deposit in the bank because you have some extra income after you have consumed some goods and services that you want to deposit and perhaps earn an interest on it. Or you could buy a bond or a stock Even though this is a type of financial investment, for a macroeconomist, this is going to be savings because you're buying something out of your savings, which is either a bond or a stock that might give you a return in the future. Okay, so savings can come from households in these different ways, or they can come from the government, right? In which case, perhaps the government is spending less than they earn in tax revenue, and so the government might have some savings. So you have the savings from the households, these are private savings, and the savings from the government, which are public savings. So the supply of loanable funds, funds that can be lent out, or loans that can be made, comes from really national savings. Okay, so national savings equals the supply of loanable funds. Let's talk about demand for loanable funds. So we want to ask the question, well, we know that there are people who have excess money and they can lend out and they are the savers or the lenders, but we also have borrowers, and the whole purpose of the financial system is to put these two guys together. So the demand for loanable funds could come from anyone who wants to invest. This is not financial investment. This investment refers to either you want to expand your business and you want to borrow a little bit of money. So this could be business fixed investment. You want to buy equipment or tools or machinery for your business. All of that would fall under business fixed investment. Either you want to buy a home, so that would be residential investment. And then there are some parts of investment that is just from unsold goods and services. So that's goods, really, inventory. Right, so these are the three types of investment that we're talking about when we think about who is demanding loans. It could be to expand your business, it could be to buy a home, etc. Okay, so now we talk about the price. The price of loanable funds is going to be the real interest rate. This is representing, the real interest rate is representing the amount that borrowers pay for loans, to take out a loan, and also the amount that lenders or savers receive on their saving. Okay, and recall that our assumption was that the price of loanable funds is the same for borrowers and savers. Of course, in reality, these interest rates would differ. A bank perhaps would charge a higher interest rate to someone who's borrowing and give a lower interest rate to someone who's saving or depositing in the bank, and then the difference would make up for their profits or for any type of investment that they incur. But this is sort of the idea. Now let's think about how does our interest rate R, this is a real interest rate, how does that vary with, or how does that cause saving and investment to fluctuate? Or what's the relationship between the real interest rate and saving and investment? So if we are thinking about saving, which is our supply side, supply of loanable funds, I would like you to think like a saver. or a lender. Okay? And if we are thinking about investment, then which is the demand for loanable funds, then I would like you to think like a borrower. Okay? So now let's think about this. If the real interest rate goes up, this means that if you were a saver or a lender and you'd made a deposit in the bank, that you're going to get back more interest on that deposit. That would incentivize you to increase your savings. Savings would go up, and therefore the supply of loanable funds would go up. And so notice the positive relationship between the real interest rate and the supply of loanable funds. Okay, here. When we think about demand, right, and investment, we can think about real interest rate going up, but now this is the cost to the borrower. So now if you're borrowing or you're taking out a loan, then real interest rate going up means that now it's more expensive to borrow. And so that would decrease, this would decrease investment. In other words, the demand for loanable funds would go down. So notice now there is an inverse relationship between the real interest rate and the demand for loanable funds. And what we want to do here is we want to take these ideas, this idea of supply and this idea of demand, to a graph. A graph in which we are going to talk about the market for loanable funds. So again, the market for loanable funds is going to be reflecting three things: the supply, the demand, and the price, which is the real interest rate. So notice when we think about savings and the supply of loanable funds, if you want to draw a supply curve, that is going to be upward sloping if we put loanable funds, the quantity of loanable funds or loans, on the x-axis, and we put the price, which is the real interest rate, on the y-axis. So this is very important, what we put on the y-axis and what we put on the x-axis. So loanable funds are measured in dollars, and real interest rate is just a percentage, right? So this is in percent. So again, the supply of loanable funds is going to be an upward sloping straight line, because this is reflecting the positive relationship between R and loanable funds, interest rate and loanable funds. So as R goes up, notice as R goes up, we are going to be demanding more loanable funds. Now, when we talk about demand for loanable funds, then this is an inverse relationship, and this is going to be reflected in a downward sloping line. This is demand. Okay. And this is reflecting investment. Okay, so this guy over here is investment, and this guy over here, savings, is just this is national savings. This is the supply of loanable funds. And we have here the equilibrium interest rate. So equilibrium interest rate is going to be achieved at a point where the quantity demanded of loanable funds equals the quantity supplied of loanable funds. And the interest rate that clears the market is going to be called the equilibrium real interest rate. And at this rate, the borrowers are borrowing LF star and the savers are supplying LF star, which is the quantity of loans in dollars. So if we were above, if we were at a point that was somewhere here, which is R1, at R1, notice, at R1, the quantity demanded of loanable funds is less than the quantity supplied of loanable funds. And you can see this by just dropping a vertical line down here. So you're measuring demand on the green demand curve, and you're measuring supply on the red supply curve. Okay, so here the quantity supplied exceeds the quantity demanded. So typically when there is an excess supply of funds, the price must drop. So at this point, there is excess supply. And whenever there is excess supply in the market, the price must drop. So R should decrease and get to R star. Similarly, you could think about another point which is below R star, which is, let's take another color here, which is at, like, let's say at R2. So at R2, what's going on? At R2, the quantity demanded of loanable funds is greater than the quantity supplied of loanable funds. So this is excess demand. And whenever there is excess demand, to adjust, the prices would adjust to bring about equilibrium. So R should, or would rise, in fact, to bring about equilibrium in the market.